All right, good morning, everyone. I want to thank you again for taking the time to join us today. We're going to be going through harassment training, prevention, what it looks like, what you should do if you're encountering it, how to report it, and if anyone is unable to hear me, please type a note in the chat box. If you're not seeing my screen, harassment prevention, please let me know. You may need to restart it to see if you can get it to appear on your side. But that said, we'll go ahead and get started. Today's workforce presents an incredibly diverse population. With the continual changing work environment, we all have to sit back and assess our personal biases, our habits, our personalities, and our communication methods to ensure that we are cognizant of the fact that things we possibly do, say, may have impacts or ramifications, and those behaviors may be perceived as someone else or someone else as being harassing. So we sit back and assess ourselves. So what differences do we see in people that could drive a bias or create a situation where there's prejudice? Their skin color, cultures, your national origin, marital status, family choices, sizes, number of children, education levels, type of education, our values, priorities, or lifestyle, age and gender, religious beliefs, sexual preferences, even things like hairstyle, color, length, your clothing choices, tattoos, body piercings, etc. Harassment can be about almost any personal characteristic, and it can be between any two people, employees, co-workers, managers, or even non-employees like clients, contractors, or even vendors. So when we work with people who are different from us, sometimes it's easy for our attitudes, our biases, our prejudices to get in the way. We may not even realize it. So keeping that in mind, what types of things happen if our biases or prejudices get in the way? We might have what are destructive responses to these types of environments. We might complain. We'll have personal insult or teasing. We'll avoid conflicts. So somebody upsets us, and rather than dealing with it, we may walk away. We're mad, and then we close down those walls of communication. We may have loud arguments or discussions. We may feel physically threatened or create threats, physical and verbal fights or attacks. Those destructive responses have an enormous impact on our work environment. So what types of impacts does it have on us? There's emotional effects. Chief among the effects for harassment and impediments to our productivity are the emotional effects. Other effects might be our productivity levels, which impacts the company and us as well. It might cause our personal bodies to react in a way that creates illness or injury. So we start to feel sick. We call in more frequently. We don't go to work because we avoid those conflicts. So they're troublesome. They disrupt us, make us less successful, create a non-functional work environment. There's legal implications. Not only is workplace harassment disruptive with regards to our personal aspects, but they can be a violation of Title VII of the Civil Rights Act, which is one that tells us, of course, that we cannot be discriminated against or discriminate against someone based on things like race, color, religion, sex, national origin, age, disability, sexual orientation, or any other legally protected category. So one of our objectives today is going to be how to recognize harassment, ways to avoid harassing others, how to respond to harassment, how to report harassment if we observe it or are a part of it, subjected to it, how to encourage a respectful working environment. So I want everybody to sit back and think about a time when you felt humiliated, embarrassed, demeaned, anxious, or afraid. And then ask yourself, was that feeling driven by something you did, something you observed being done, or maybe something that was done to you? Was it something within your own control? Or was it out of your control, something that you couldn't prevent from happening? Has it happened before? If so, is it getting worse, more frequent? Is it causing impacts to your health and well-being or your work environment, your productivity? Have you taken any constructive steps to eliminate the problem? These are some of the thought processes that we go through when we try to determine if we're dealing with a harassment type of situation and what we can or can't do about that situation and how it's impacting us. So harassment, what is it exactly? Well, it's unwanted, persistent behaviors. It can be intimidating, tormenting, annoying, troublesome, offensive. It can be threatening, disturbing, or humiliating. As I alluded to before, it can be based on sex, gender, gender identity, religion, race, colors of your skin, your sexual orientation, physical or mental disabilities, age. I mean, there are many categories that harassment can take place in. Religion and gender or racial harassment involve unwanted attention or hostility that includes jokes or taunting and teasing a person based on their religious beliefs. And it's a protected category, again, under the Civil Rights Act. You also can have harassment based on age. I think we've all heard that before, that it basically goes in the ADEA, which is the Americans Disability Act, and then the Age Discrimination Act, or your EEO, Equal Employment Opportunity. It protects individuals that fall in the ages of 40 and over. So you can have a potential for age discrimination or implied age discrimination or harassment without even realizing it. And then you have your harassment based on disability. So if we are creating any kind of environment that seems harassing to someone who has a disability, they may walk with a cane, be in a wheelchair, be communicationally challenged. These are all areas that can be an area of harassment. So harassment is conduct directed at a person, causing substantial emotional and physical stress, and serves no legitimate business reason. So like, for instance, it can happen even before you've been hired, at the time of a job interview. We should never, during an interview, ask you, or anyone ask you, about your age, disabilities, ethnic background, country of origin, sexual preferences, age. That should never happen, even before you are hired. So at the point of interview, it shouldn't happen. There are many forms of harassment. Verbal conduct. Things that can be considered verbal conduct would be suggested comments, flirtation, derogatory jokes, name-calling, obscene language, kidding, teasing, discussions of a sexual nature, and reference to age, religion, or national origin. If we're verbally implying any of these types of things by the words we say to someone, questions we might ask, jokes we might tell, these are all verbal forms that could be considered harassment. So be cognizant of what you're saying, to who you're saying it, who is around you that might be hearing it, because it could be creating a harassing work environment. There are visual conducts of harassment. So leering or gestures. It could be something as simple as your coworker giving you what appears to be a rather aggressive stare, scowling. We need to be very, very aware of those body messages we put off that could imply that we are harassing or angry at or trying to imply some kind of a threat to an individual. It could be derogatory or sexually oriented posters, pictures, written words, pornography, cartoons or drawing, even graffiti, emails, notes, letters. These are all visual conducts. Depending on the content of that, can be a form of harassment. So let's ask ourselves, physical conduct, that's the one that most of us think of as harassing. It can be the actual act of being assaulted. It could be offensive touching, grabbing, patting, pinching, stroking. I mean, these are all the things that we normally think of as harassment. What we don't think of is things like blocking of movement. You try to go across the office, somebody steps in front of you, blocks your progress. If it's done in an aggressive manner, this most definitely is harassment. What about rubbing of shoulders and hugging of individuals? Can that be harassment? Yeah, it actually can. Depending on how it is done, who it is done by, between, if it's consensual, if it's frequent or sexually implicit in nature, yes, these all can be. We all have our boundaries, our personal boundaries. And if somebody is coming within those personal boundaries and giving us a hug or rubbing our shoulders, and we don't like that, if we're not letting them know that, or we tell them and they continue to do it, certainly it's a harassing environment because it's an offensive physical element that we've asked not to have happen. So we all have to be aware of that. If it's something that's happening and it's bothersome to us, we should share that we have those personal boundaries. If it's something that you're not offended by, but you're around others who are offended by somebody who's constantly rubbing your shoulders or hugging you, that can create a harassing environment for the people around you. So it's not always necessarily the person that it's done to, but it can be the people around you, and probably isn't workplace appropriate. So be cognizant of those issues as well. So threats, demands with regard to harassment, physical or verbal threats or abuse. I mean, we all know those are obvious elements of abuse. If somebody is saying, if you don't do this for me, I will, and there's some sort of an implied threat or danger or punishment there. I mean, outside of obviously being told that you need to do your work, if it's an ethical and safe issue that you're supposed to be doing, we can obviously demand that our employees do their job, but we can't create a physical and a threatening environment to accomplish things, or requiring sexual favors. There's a quid pro quo, which is essentially the legal term for this for that, which essentially says that if you do this for me, or if you don't do this for me, so you're requiring something or offering something for something in return for a sexual favor. These are your quid pro quo kind of environments. So a boss saying, you know, if you go out on a date with me, I'll give you that raise, or if you don't go out on a date with me, I'm going to fire you. These would be those types of harassing environments. Then you get into your hostile work environment. Conduct is so sufficiently severe or perverse to create a hostile work environment. So these types of behaviors are persistent and severe. Having somebody come up once and wink at you or rub your shoulder probably isn't going to meet that definition. But if it goes beyond that, if we share our reservations toward that type of behavior and it continues, then we start getting into those questionable issues of harassment. So a hostile work environment, slightly different from a harassing environment, but of the same context. So it's comments or conduct based on sex, race, religion, or other protected categories which unreasonably interferes with an employee's work performance or creates an intimidating, hostile, or offensive work environment. So what you might think of are things like if you have a coworker or a peer who has a selective choice of language use. They like to swear a lot. They may be aggressive in all of their communications. In other words, they don't talk, they don't communicate, they yell, or they shake their fists when they communicate in that kind of threatening fashion. These are the types of things that would be intimidating or hostile, creating an offensive work environment. So that's kind of one of those distinctions between maybe a harassing versus a hostile. But they ultimately kind of go hand in hand. So the true test of appropriateness, it's just an old adage I've heard for many, many years, is that if you ask yourself, would I say or do this if someone I held in high regard, like my spouse, my mother, my child, or it could even be a peer, a boss, mentor, coworker, if they were here, would I do this or say this? That's one of those questions you ask yourself to determine whether or not what you're saying or doing is all that appropriate. So if you're thinking about telling a joke or sharing a personal life experience with someone, you may want to sit back and ask yourself, is this really workplace appropriate, and would I share that information given this type of a situation? So that's sort of the true test of appropriateness when it comes to verbal or visual types of things. So who can commit harassment? Literally everyone. Your managers, employees, clients, contractors, vendors, even guests or visitors. If they're the ones creating that harassing environment, then they can commit that. So it's not just an employee to a manager, a supervisor, peer-to-peer. It literally goes outside of the boundaries of the business and can include people like guests, contractors, vendors, and visitors to the workplace. So who are the victims of harassment? The victim can be anyone affected by the conduct. As I expressed earlier, it may not be the person actually involved in the interaction. It can be those around you. So if the offensive conduct is not directed at you, but it's something that you're observing in your work environment, then it can be harassing to you. I mean, we want to express to people, we want to have a relaxed work environment and be able to communicate openly and have friends and share details, but we have to be very careful about who we do that with, the environment we do it in, the method in which we share it, because other people might overhear, observe, become privy to information that we didn't intend for anyone else and probably isn't appropriate for them to have heard. So be very aware of those things that you say and do and who are around you and the avenue in which you choose to do it. If you're sending emails to friends, that email could be passed along to someone else. If you're passing along a joke that you think is funny to a friend and they have an email chain, that could get passed along to another peer or coworker, and that joke may be offensive to them. Probably not appropriate in the workplace. In your home personal environment, that's a different scenario. But when you're dealing with peers, friends, coworkers, vendors and such, you probably want to avoid those types of scenarios. So ask yourself this question: is it harassment if the alleged harasser had a good intention? So what they did was just meant to help you. It wasn't, I wasn't trying to harass you when I came up and gave you a hug yesterday and the day before that and the day before that. I just knew you were going through troubling times, and I wanted you to know that I was there for you. Is that harassment? Yeah, it can be if I've shared with that person that I don't like to be hugged, or I don't want my shoulders rubbed, or that hug is in some way inappropriate. You know, there's that I refer to it as the guy hug, you know, the one where they stand next to you and they put their arm around you and kind of squeeze your shoulder, versus the one where they come up and they embrace you and rub your back. You know, there are big distinctions between the type of interaction. So yes, even good intentioned things can be harassment. For example, you might have a manager who frequently calls you names. This is such a loser type of response of work from you. You're being lazy and irresponsible. But they say, oh, I just did that because I wanted to get you to improve your performance. And it worked. Your performance improved. Well, yeah, my performance improved because I felt threatened. So, yeah, even though the harasser had good intention, it didn't make it not harassment. Versus had that individual come to you and said, here are the work expectations, you're not meeting them, what's going on, how can I help you to improve that performance? So the way in which we convey that message can be harassing if it's not done in a respectful and open, communicative, business professional type of manner. Could you be contributing to potential harassment? We all have to sit down and ask ourselves. Ironically enough, if we participate in, and by virtue of participating, it could be simply by not reporting. So if I observe someone harassing someone else, being abusive to someone else, and I don't report it, yeah, I'm actually contributing to that. I have an obligation, a right, to report a harassing environment. If I'm with a group of friends and they are teasing, taunting, or talking poorly about another person, and I don't step up and say something, or I don't remove myself from that environment. In other words, simply say, you know what, I'm not going to listen to or participate in this conversation and walk away, then yes, I'm actually contributing to that harassing situation. So by virtue of doing nothing, sitting there, we are participating. So be aware that when disrespectful activities, behaviors happen, if we don't take a stance on it, we are essentially participating in that environment. We want everybody to know that the company strictly prohibits any kind of harassing environment. So whether it's based on age, gender, color, religion, national origin, disability, or any characteristic, the company strictly prohibits it. If individuals are participating in it, they will be disciplined. It is a no-tolerance kind of situation. We want to take note that bullying is a form of harassment. So employees who are experiencing bullying, incivilities, interpersonal conflicts, excuse me, those are considered harassing environments. So if you're being bullied or feel like you're being bullied, or you're observing somebody that it looks like somebody's bullying them, it is harassment. And bullying ultimately has the same effect that harassment does on individuals. It can lower their self-esteem, their well-being. They're less satisfied at their jobs. They tend to have more frequent occurrences of absence or illness. They may quit. So we lose good people if we don't consider the fact that bullying is also a harassing environment. Stalking is another form, or a common form of harassment. A stalker's actions may be innocuous when out of context, But when we generally look at them in the big picture, they could be very harassing in nature. Things like calling somebody repeatedly over and over again. Obviously, it's stalking. It's a harassing environment. Doing things like taking somebody you know is terrified to death of spiders or dogs and posting these pictures on their desks or sending them through email to them of spiders or vicious barking dogs or dogs of any nature. Those are actually stalking type of situations. Some of us may think it's funny, but it's ultimately not. I mean, if somebody has a natural fear of something, pressing or joking about that fear is harassment. So harassers, any employee who engages in harassment can expect disciplinary action. This could be up to and including termination, depending on the circumstance. Everyone needs to be aware of Telenote's policy on harassment. Make sure that you understand it, that you're following it, that you're reporting any issues of it, or that you feel like you're being harassed or in a harassing environment of any kind, that you take it to someone's attention. Don't sit back and think it'll get better. Bring it to their attention. It's essential that members of the workplace remain aware of the established regulations governing the workplace behavior, that they report any violations. We should all increase our efforts to avoid and to address promptly those issues when they occur. What do you do if you see or experience harassment? If you're comfortable, confront the individual, discuss it, and resolve it. For example, if you have a coworker or a peer who tends to be a touchy person, they want to hug you, or they walk up and they brush your arm or rub your shoulder. If it bothers you, if that's an invasion of your personal space, let them know that in a respectful manner. Simply express to them, you know what, I this personal space, I know it's odd, but I would rather you not rub my shoulder or touch my arms when we communicate. So if you're comfortable, you're not feeling threatened, discuss it with them, resolve it. Most people are going to understand that and they'll respect it moving forward. If it persists or you're not comfortable, report it to your supervisor, human resources, or senior management. But don't sit back and do nothing. You want to document the facts. So if something truly disturbing has happened, it's alarming, it's repeated, you want to have those facts together so that when you do report it, that they're fresh in your mind. You're able to go back and recommunicate what happened. Sometimes in the moment, even hours after something happens, if we don't capture that stuff, it's hard to go back and remember all the details. So if you've got something aggressive or harassing that's truly, truly disturbing, and you immediately know you need to do something about this, order your thoughts, jot down the information, get that all documented. A workplace free of harassment is everyone's responsibility. You're encouraged to report any threats of violence, harassment, or anything that makes you uncomfortable or stressed or unhappy at work. We truly want a relaxing and pleasant work environment that is also compliant with laws and company policy. The reporting methods that exist, for specifics, go ahead and review the company policy. You'll all be provided with a copy of that at the end of this presentation. It will be emailed out to you. But most are going to include in-person or verbal, so you can take your complaint directly to a supervisor or HR. Another form would be completing a formal complaint form, sending that in. In some cases, you may be asked to do that after the verbal complaint is made. And in some cases, it may be through someone else. For example, when somebody has observed a harassing situation and they report it, it's literally being done on your behalf by someone else. And during the investigation period, they may come back and confirm that with you, get those details, but it can be done through someone else. All investigations will be taken seriously. They'll be fairly investigated and with prompt remedial action taken. So the consequences are going to fit the crime. If someone isn't aware that they've created a harassing environment and we sit down, we talk with them, and it's just a simple lack of misunderstanding. Somebody was afraid to go to them and say, you know, you constantly hugging me is bothersome. And we sit down and talk with this person. Gosh, I didn't know. Thank you for letting me know. Yeah, I'll stop that. You know, that may be the extent of it. And making sure the individual understands that if it happens again, there would be something additional that took place. But if it's more egregious, more problematic, or more harassing in nature, it could be termination upon completion of the investigation. So the punishment will fit the crime. There will be absolutely no retaliation tolerated. So if someone does bring forward a complaint, the company will not tolerate, will not tolerate anyone retaliating against them. So the person that the complaint was made about, supervisors, managers, we won't tolerate any type of retaliation toward an individual who has filed a complaint. The same goes for outside vendors, clients. If they've had a complaint filed against them and we've taken it to whoever is going to help manage that, or we've terminated that relationship, the company is going to do whatever actions they can to prevent retaliation of that nature. We also won't tolerate retaliation between employees for someone who has reported a violation. So you indicate that this person is disrespectful, they're calling you names, etc., and we go and we talk with this person and we have a conversation, put them on some kind of a performance improvement plan, and then we find out that they're going behind this effort and now sending you texts or calling you outside of working environment or working time, or sending you emails, or they're sending messages through someone else, and that they're retaliating against you for that report, the company is not going to tolerate that. So retaliation in any form will not be tolerated. Okay, mutual respect. It's going to be each of us sharing our responsibility in creating an atmosphere of mutual respect. Being respectful is a couple of things: expressing disagreement in a way that values one's opinion and is respectful in delivering content. Members working together for resolution. We are all in this together kind of attitude. Respect is members can have a disagreement and still work together in a respectful manner. Ideas are heard and given fair consideration. There are no personal attacks during conversations or between other individuals. We allow differences without judgment. So someone can express a difference of opinion and we can listen to it and appreciate it. We may not agree with it, but we don't judge them or attack them for it. We maintain calm and open communication. So we have to be respectful in how we deal with each other, and this is how we do that. Okay, at this point, I'm going to open the lines back up, unmute everyone, see if anybody has any particular questions. All right, can everyone hear me? Yep.
Yes.
Does anyone have any questions?
Say long silence, pause. I've either lost everybody, put you to sleep, or you truly have no questions.
I have no questions. Yeah, no questions.
Okay, great. Well, at this time, what we're going to do is we can release all of the employees to drop off the training. You will be sent some subsequent documents. You'll sign off on basically saying that you've had the training, understood it. You'll be given a copy of the company policy. Go ahead and review everything, sign it, get it returned back to your supervisor. And then I'm going to continue on with the managers and supervisors for a little bit longer. So if the managers and supervisors will stay online, all the rest of you are free to drop off. And I thank you again for participating.
Thank you. Thank you.
Have a great day.
So do the team leads need to get off or stay on?
Team leads probably should stay on.
Okay.
I think we might have lost them.
Yeah, I think so too.
Oh dear, okay. Well, this is being recorded, so we'll be able to share it with them again, if necessary.
You want me to text them real quick, Kathy?
Sure.
Okay.
All right, I'll wait for a few seconds and see if we need to have a few more drop-on. We're just going to go through a couple more things for the supervisors, leaders, and managers. Won't take long, and then we'll get you back to work.
What about our trainer?
I'm sorry, what?
What about our trainer? Do you want her to stay on?
You know, I think it would be good to keep him on.
Okay.
Okay, we'll wait just a second longer to see if anybody's going to join us again. Okay, given this is being recorded, I'm going to go ahead and mute the lines. I'm going to start the recording back up, and we'll go ahead and continue through this. And then if anybody's missed this piece of it, they can pick up at that point and just review it. If anybody can't hear me, please type in the chat box and let me know, but we'll go ahead and move forward. Okay, can everyone hear me?
No. Yeah. No, I can't.
All right.
Yeah, I can, yeah.
Okay, for some reason, when I mute everybody, I'm blocking some people out. So for sake of interference, if individual people can mute their individual lines, I'm going to leave this one open, and we'll continue on. Okay. All right, so the leader's role in preventing harassment is going to be establish and communicate and model the expectations. In other words, walk the walk. If showing our employees the behaviors we expect them to model and we're doing something otherwise, then they're going to witness that and think that it's okay for them. For individuals that are joining now, if you'll mute your individual lines to avoid interference, I would appreciate it, and then we'll continue on. Okay, I've got someone who has joined, and there's a lot of interference. Okay, that seems a little better. Thank you. All right. We want to monitor the work environment. So as supervisors, make sure that you're actively monitoring the work environment. Walk around, talk with people. Make sure that you're not seeing anything that might indicate that there's some harassing situations going on. If somebody seems overly withdrawn all of a sudden, or somebody seems angry and or their work has all of a sudden been impacted, just monitor the environment. Be aware of what's going on around you. Reinforcement. Oh, wow, there's still somebody. Okay, now can everybody hear me all right? Okay, great. All right, we should be okay now. If everybody can hear me, I'll continue on. So reinforcement, take corrective actions. If harassment is happening, make sure that we're dealing with it, that we are performance managing the expectations. Investigations, get all of the facts. Be prompt, be thorough, be fair in the investigation. Make sure that we're not skimming over parts of it and more heavily investigating others. So be very, very consistent and fair and detailed in our investigations, that gathering of a harassing situation. Rumors and retaliation control. Make sure that if we are hearing rumors in the work environment, address the rumors. Put a stop to them early on. Don't allow any kind of retaliation. Make sure that we take efforts to control it, to reinforce the fact that we won't allow retaliation to take place. And then build teams who respect each other. Constantly press the issue of being able to communicate open with individuals, and the communication should be respectful in their content. When responding to employee reports, take all reports seriously. Find a place to discuss the situation in confidence. The one thing we don't want to do is tell somebody that everything they're giving us is going to be strictly held confidential, because we can't guarantee that. The reality is that if we have to go out and talk to other people about the situation, we're going to have to do that. So what we do is express that we will keep it confidential to the extent possible, but that we'll share information needed to do a thorough and complete investigation. But make sure that all of our conversations are done in a place where other people can't overhear. Gather the basic facts. Who did what, when, to who. Make sure that we get all of those. Okay, notify HR and our senior management ASAP. If we have a situation that we believe could escalate, be problematic, don't believe that we can just handle it ourselves. We want to talk to other individuals at the organization, like HR and your senior managers, just to give them a heads up, so that if it does escalate and go beyond that, that they are made aware of it. They're not going to be surprised by that. Jointly plan investigations and next steps. So once you've gathered all the information, sit down and talk with HR or a senior manager, whoever's going to be involved in that, and say, okay, here's what we've done, here's what we've gathered. Am I missing anything? What are our next steps? So when conducting the investigation, do it promptly. Be fair and thorough. Interview your witnesses, and make sure and interview them, of course, one at a time. Try to keep those interviews as close together as possible so people can't meet and get their stories together. In between those, it may even take sometimes, if there's multiple witnesses, it may even take having a couple of people doing interviews simultaneously so that they're all being interviewed independently but at the same time. Keep an open mind. Keep as confidential as possible. Document everything and retain it. Consider taking interim action. So if it's so egregious that we need to get somebody out of the work environment, then get them out of the work environment until the investigation is complete. That may be sending them home with or without pay, depending on the situation, until that investigation is complete. Take all your facts, reach your conclusions, and then communicate the decisions. And last, but of course, most important is follow-up. So once we've communicated the decision, whatever action is going to be taken, follow back up with the individual that was being harassed or the individual that is doing the harassing to see how things are going. Are they taking the steps they need to take to not do the harassing type of environments or situations that they were doing? Is the person that was being harassed or feeling harassed or being upset by this environment, are things better for that individual? Follow up, because if we don't follow up, we don't know whether or not the steps taken actually remedied the issue. And then emphasize, of course, no retaliation. So harassment prevention. Don't assume that behavior is okay just because no one has complained. That's why I talk about monitoring the work environment. Some individuals just won't bring it forward. It's so problematic for them to actually come to you and say something that they'll sit back and wait for it to hopefully get better, or they'll leave. So don't assume that it's okay even if they haven't said something. Monitor your work environment and take actions. And only allow employees to say and do things that are appropriate. Enforce those expectations. If we're observing it or hearing somebody talk about someone else saying something that truly isn't business appropriate, get with that individual and enforce that expectation. Harassment enforcement. Know what's expected and make sure your employees know what's expected. Enforce and reinforce those expectations. Let the punishment fit the offense. We want to build an environment of mutual respect. So encourage employees to appreciate and respect each other as individuals. We all communicate differently, we look different, we act different, we are all different. So encourage those differences and the fact that we respect and enjoy and appreciate those differences. Help employees value the differences in backgrounds and opinions. It's amazing how we might not take somebody's input or feedback regarding an idea or something we did or said at the moment it happens, but if we sit back and think about it, it actually helped. It was of value, and in the end, we wind up appreciating it. So we have to kind of help employees figure out how to do that. If it means walking away, not responding immediately, reassessing it, and coming back, that's what we want to do, is encourage them to do that. As leaders, you're held to a higher standard. Your employees are going to expect more out of you. So set a tone of mutual respect, communication, and courtesy. You're going to do that, walk the walk, talk the talk. If they see you, observe you doing that, that's what they're going to also do. And if we don't do it, they don't think they have to. So be consistent. Do not date or pursue sexual relations with employees who report to you. It's never a good idea, and we don't want to go there. Create rapport with your employees so they're comfortable coming to you with issues. And then protect the employee's privacy. So make sure that you have those communications, those conversations in a private setting where they can talk to you in an open fashion and not feel like somebody's going to overhear it, whether it's going to be shared with someone else. If somebody comes to you with something that doesn't need to be investigated, it's simply just a need to talk to you about an issue, make sure you're not sharing that with anyone else. So maintain their confidences. So in summary, know what harassment is. Respond quickly to potential harassing situations. Coach employees to follow policy. Report all complaints to HR and senior management immediately. Employees to respect each other's differences. Okay, I'm going to unmute these lines. Does anyone have any questions about this information?
No.
Nope. I think we're good.